Good morning. Good morning to those who are here in the room and also to those joining us on the live stream. We're really glad you're here this morning. This is Westminster Presbyterian Church's Adult Ed session. We are doing a year on building the beloved community. And today we have Reverend Tian-Ren Lin joining us from New York to talk about building friendship in the beloved community. Reverend Lin is the program director for the Leadership Development Initiative at Trinity Church Wall Street, a cultural sociologist and author of Prosperity Gospel Latinos and Their American Dream. We are really, I forgot to mention almost the most important reference, which is that Reverend Shin and Tony know each other well. So that is a really fun connection. We are really glad you're here today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we're looking forward to learning from you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And happy Reformation Day. That's something I can say with Presbyterians. I work in an Episcopal church now, so it's not as big of a deal. So thank you, Rachel, for the invitation. I also want to thank Mahin Hamilton for helping to arrange this. And like Rachel said, David and I go back many years. We both went to seminary in the late 1900s. I like to say that now. And yeah, we've been friends for a long time. He's actually gave me a tour of your church when I was there in 2017. I don't know if it was fully finished yet. It was in the process of getting there, and it's you have an impressive, not just building, but impressive ministry. I was there in 2017. I stayed in David's house for a week. I was there to do some research on cities that experience racial tension because of police violence, specifically violence towards Black men and boys. 2017, right? It was because of Yolanda Castillo. And I interviewed a bunch of people who lived in the area where the incident happened, people who worked at around his school where he was a lunch worker, and even some people who were involved in the protest and the reform that took place. And at that time, going back to my notes and some of the recordings, interviews I did, nobody imagined 2020, right? It was, I'm sure all of you knew that you didn't imagine that would happen either, but your church and your community is in a place that for better or for worse is making history in America. I hope it's history for the better. We hope we can work towards a better country. So let's start with a word of prayer. Let's pray, and then we'll dive into the topic of friendship. Gracious and loving God, we thank you for this morning, for the time that you've blessed us with to be together, for the gift of technology, that some of us can be physically together, some of us can be virtually together, but we can all be together by your Spirit in your presence. And we ask that you will teach us, you will open our hearts and our minds to receive what you have prepared for us. And Lord, give us greater insight into this gift of friendship that you've blessed us with. Thank you, and we pray this in the name of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. So friendship, when I was invited to share with you on the beloved community, I thought instead of speaking directly to what the beloved community was and the theological underpinning of what that means, I thought I would touch on two issues that are required for a beloved community to exist, but are sometimes not at the center of it, right? And that's friendship and sacrifice, right? So in later next month, I'll be sharing on the topic of sacrifice, but today it's on friendship, and I very much hope this to be an interactive Sunday school class. So feel free to chime in. The way my screen is set up, I have my notes, so I can't see you So if you want to say something, please, flag Rachel down, and she can say something. So there's some noise, and this is true for those who are virtually to please chime in. It is on the topic of friendship and community, so it makes sense for everybody to be able to chime in. And so in thinking about this, right, the beloved community, we know that what Martin Luther King Jr. meant by the beloved community is a place, a community, right, where everybody is cared for. There is equality and justice for everyone. There's no hunger or poverty or violence, and it's a wonderful place. But clearly, Reverend King, right, Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. got it from the Bible. Unfortunately, we live in a world today where I think King has been sanitized. I say he's been sanitized for secular consumption, so that he is the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and not the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Even though he literally had his name changed, him and his father, right? They had their name changed after the reformer who we're celebrating today, right? On this date in 1517, Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses at the doors of the Wittenberg Cathedral. And he was named after this radical, fairly radical reformer. But today in popular culture, Martin Luther King Jr. has been sanitized and into what director Spike Lee calls the magic Negro trope, right? In movies, you see this in a lot of movies. There's a lot of trouble, there are challenges, and then a black guy shows up, and through some magical powers, he teaches he saves the marriage, saves the town, teaches the guy how to play golf, right? And it's a trope in American culture because we end up using African Americans into this myth that they have this magic power to make the world better. And unfortunately, King today has been sanitized into that role, right? And you have to excuse me, my dog is having an issue back there. But what King was aiming for is something that he learned right out of the Black church experience, right? King was formed and forged through the Black church. He didn't invent the things that he taught, right? He stood on the shoulders of giants who've been talking and teaching these things for many generations. And the idea of the beloved community comes out of that, of those ideas. It comes out of the gospel and the Bible. What he meant by the beloved community is Acts 2, the church, right? When the church first got together, they were living in one accord. They were in agreement. They shared everything in common, so that they had no one had any needs. And something that people take for granted, or we forget because we don't live in first century Palestine, is that the church, as described in the book of Acts, were very, very small. Right? It says in Acts 2 that these are people, they were gathering in people's homes and they were sharing meals. And we know, right, through archaeological evidence, how big those homes were. Right? We're not talking even 50 people who were gathering, right? These were small groups, 20 people at most were able to gather in these small spaces, and they were able to share those. They were able to have everything in common, and they were able to be in one accord, in agreement with one another, because they were so small. We often take that idea and we get frustrated. That today churches of hundreds of people, thousands of people, why can't we be like Acts 2? Because we're so big, right? It's human nature we're fallen creatures. It's very hard to have this level of agreement when there's so many of us. But in the early church, there were small communities, and at the core of those communities, it was friendship. It was a friend that held up and made this communities real. This beloved community real. And that, again, I'm going to talk about this more next month. But Jesus himself says, right, no greater love. There's no greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friend. And King had that very much in mind as he thought and theorized the idea of the beloved community. He himself, in his own life, if you read his biographies or the history of the civil rights movement, King had a close network of friends, small circle of friends, and he had a larger circle of friends. If you know the history of the civil rights movement and how African Americans had to travel around the South, right? There were only so many places they could eat, so many places they could stay. So when he was traveling, when he was doing all this work, one, he was traveling with a group of people, of friends, and two, he was staying mostly in their homes. He was staying in their homes. He was eating in the homes of other people, and these were the friendships were forged, right? Can you imagine if he wasn't able to stay in people's houses, right? Can you imagine if his supporters say, "We support you, but you can't stay in my house, you can't eat in my house," right? We would have had the civil rights movement if they didn't have that type of intimate friendships and relationships. And so the beloved community is dependent on friendships. But today, in 2021, and even before the pandemic, America is going through a crisis of friendship. Right? We have a crisis of friendship in that in the latest survey in 2021, half of all Americans report that they have less than 3 friends. And that includes their spouse, right? Spouses and partners. In 1990, just 30 years ago, only 27% of Americans said that they had less than 3 friends. Now, 3 friends, some of you might think is not bad, right? 3 friends in today's society. But of those, of the 50% of Americans who have less than 3 friends, 12% of Americans say that they have 0 friends. They have no close friends at all, nothing. In 1990, only 3% of Americans will self-report that, right? And again, this is a survey. So they said they had no friends, and it's a crisis because if think about the magnitude of this, right? For every 10 people in America, one of them has 0 friends. Right? If there are 10 people in that room, right, one of you might not have 0 friends, right? No, literally. But if you walk down the street one day, you count every 10 people, right? One of them will say that they have 0 friends, right? And that's tremendous. And it's tragic. Only 30 years ago, 33% of Americans, so 1/3 of all Americans, said self-reported having more than 10 close friends. There were more than 10 people they could go to if they needed something, if they needed to talk, if they needed to rely on someone. They have more than 10. And now 1 in 10 Americans, right? More than 1 in 10, right? Technically is 3 in 25 or 4%. But that's a tremendous number. And it's a crisis not just for individuals, but as a society. I think that this is posing a challenge on a lot of the divisions we have. It's a threat to democracy and even our national security. The individualism, right, that distinguished Americans for so many generations, even from the inception of this country. That individualism has led to a nation of declining friendships. And so I don't know the congregation there personally, but is this something that you see? Is this something you see in your community, or is the decline of friendship something foreign to you?
I've got the mic open for anyone that might have any comments. Does anyone see this kind of in our own community, or maybe even if it's hard to say, yeah, I see that at Westminster and the communities you're involved in general? Is it a crisis of friendship? Is it harder to connect and build deep relationships with folks in the time that we're in now? I see some nodding. All right.
I think particularly in the divisive political times we're in now. I know I used to have a friend that I don't hardly see anymore because we are so divided in our how we view the world.
Yeah, you're reminding me of, it's a tradition that we gather to carve pumpkins every year. We didn't do it last year. It's usually a big group thing. And yesterday we did it outside, and it was awkward because everyone was coming in with different ideas about what was safe and how to navigate that experience. So I think you're right. It is. It just feels like there's a lot more weight on those things.
I think sadly over the last couple of years, one of the metrics of public health has been deaths of despair. Obviously, that include overdose deaths, alcoholism, suicide. And I think that metric alone and how prevalent that has become in society, so much so that it had to become a named thing because it was just so obvious, really speaks to the fact that in a country of 300 million people, people have never felt more alone.
Yeah.
Got another comment here in the back.
I was just thinking about when was it easiest to make friends, and that's when we have young children and you go to nursery school and you go to school and you go to PTA meetings and you go to pumpkin parties and you just have a whole lot of friends with similar needs to provide a nice environment for our young children. And then as you get older and you get to like my age and you become widowed, things change a lot. Things change a great deal for widows because it's a couple world. My book group was talking about that the other day. We were all widows and we were saying it's just really different.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, I remember the days of the Golden Girls, right? That was, it was almost a norm back in those days that friends would get together and live with one another so you wouldn't be alone. But now it's, yeah, I mean, with my friends, we can't even coordinate when to go on vacation together, right? There are people, I'm here in New York City and I have a friend who lives, less than 10 minutes from me. And we've been trying to get together literally for a year. For a year, we've been trying to get together. And there's something about modern society that makes it very difficult to foster this type of friendships. And I think it's an important conversation to have. I hope this, the point of church is never just to show up one day, it is to start something. So I hope this helps to start a conversation for your church and for your communities. On the political issue, when I was doing the research in 2017, right? One of the questions I asked is, had the recent election back, the 2016 election, had the recent elections harm your relationships, right? And almost everybody I asked said that something happened in 2016 that was different from every election before that ended. Even family relationships were shattered. It was like we as a nation we were forced to choose sides, or we were pushed into a certain side that made us unable to be together. Now, on the topic of death of despair, C.S. Lewis very, very famously said, "Friendship is unnecessary, like philosophy, like art, like the universe itself. It has no survival value. Rather, it is one of those things which gives value to survival. Now, that's very nice. I think he meant well in saying that, right? He's saying that friendships are not there for utilitarian purposes, but that they're the very reason why we want to survive. But obviously, he wrote that before the science on friendship, and I won't go into it. But there's plenty of books, even popular books on the science and the importance of friendship. But it turns out C.S. Lewis was wrong. Right? Friendships are necessary, and they are very much a part of our survival. The most famous evidence of this is the longest study ever conducted in any scientific study is the Harvard Good Life study. The study is called "What Makes a Good Life," and lessons from the longest study of happiness. And they got 80 years ago, they got a bunch of sophomores, I think it was sophomores, right? So 19-year-olds from Harvard. The study was being conducted at Harvard. They got 19-year-olds from Harvard, and then they went to the poorest, roughest area in Boston and got a bunch of teenagers from there. And then they followed them. Even the study is still going on. So it's a little over 80. I think it's 81 years old now. JFK was part of that cohort when he was at Harvard. And in that study, in the question of what makes a good life, once they control for income, right? If your income doesn't matter, your genes, your diet, exercise, all of those things. Once you take out all of those things, the one thing, the most powerful predictor of a good life, of longevity and happiness and joy, was your community, was friendship. Right? That's how powerful friendship is. Being lonely is equivalent to smoking, 15 cigarettes a day or something like that. Right? I don't know how they calculate that, but that's it's basically being lonely, having no friends. Is detrimental to our health. But think about this, right? Can you imagine a world, living in a society where people have no friends, right? Imagine that with me for a moment, where friendships are not a concept that we work with, and every relationship has a utilitarian purpose. It's practical, right? It's transactional. Every person we meet, every person in our life is there to do something for us, or we have to do something for them. And once that task is done, the relationship is over. Right now, clearly we already have relationships like that, and we don't call them friendships. Right? When you go to the grocery store, right, we have a relationship with the cashier. They have to check out whatever we bought. We need to pay them, and the moment we leave that grocery store, the relationship is over. What if every relationship in our lives was defined in that way? Right? It was about utilitarian and transactional purposes, right? That you have a partner only because of some biological need to pass on the genes, and once our genes are passed on, that's it. There's no need for a relationship, right? Our relationship with our children. Once we raise them, once we know they're going to make it, right, and once they've gotten whatever they needed from us, they're gone. And we have no relationship with them. What would life be like in those instances? And if you think about it, sadly there are people living like that who've had to live like that. But as a society, there was a time when transactional relationships were actual real friendships, right? So, and we're not talking that long ago. This is for me, right? Even for me. When my daughter was born, my daughter is 16, right? So when she was born, and this was in Charlottesville, Virginia, so it was a much smaller town, and everybody knew everybody. Our family doctor was also our pediatrician. And so he saw our whole family, and we had a lot of friends outside of his medical practice. And so he knew us, and he knew me through the Christian circles, through the clergy circles in Charlottesville. And so when our daughter was born, when he delivered my daughter, he prayed for us, right? Our daughter was born, and he prayed for us. And the nurse who was assisting him had I think the sister-in-law went to church with the doctor, so they also knew each other, right? And there was a relationship there that doesn't exist anymore. Right now, I live in New York City, right? 8 million people, and I just had to go get a checkup, and it was, thankfully I was able to find a practice that had, it was a family type of place. But most New Yorkers don't have a doctor that they go to. Most New Yorkers go to this type of urgent care type of places, and you just go, you see whoever is there, and you leave, right? There's no relationship with everything is that transactional relationship. Once you got what you needed and they got what they needed, it's over. And we lose something, right? We lose something very precious. Now, theologically, the friendships are important to us because that's what Jesus called us, right? In John 15:15, Jesus said, "I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know the master's doing. But I call you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father." The friendship is essential to us because Jesus called us friends. And the Greek word here for friends is philos, right? The root word for love, which is the root word for the beloved community. The love in the beloved community. It's about friends. Now, from a sociological perspective, I was trained as a sociologist. Humans are the only species that God ever created where we need other people to show us how to be people, right? So I talked about this a little bit when I did the men's retreat for your church. So if you were there, you heard me say this. But we have pets, right? I have a dog that came to our family when she was 12 weeks, whatever you're supposed to get them. And even though most of her life has been spent with humans, she's still a dog, right? She still doesn't know she's supposed to be quiet when daddy's on Zoom, right? When animals are always going to be animals, no matter who raises them. They're always going to be who they were created to be, do whatever they're supposed to do. People, not so much, right? And we have sad stories of children, feral children who were mistreated, children who were neglected and who were never socialized, who end up with tragic stories that they'll never be able to live in societies. Right now in New York City, I work a lot with formerly incarcerated men specifically, and there are a lot of reentry programs. I work with, there are 3 major reentry programs, and that's all they do. When you have men, people who've been locked up for 25, 30 years, and they've never been outside they don't know what freedom is for 25, 30 years. It's not just that, they have a hard time using cell phones and emails and things like that, but even interacting with people, right? How do you hold a conversation? How do you talk to women? Some of these guys, they went in when they were teenagers, and they've never had a friendship with a woman because they were locked up in facilities for men. And these are things that they need to be taught, right? The reentry program, they need to be re-socialized. They need other people to show them and teach them and mentor them to function with other people. This is, all of us are experiencing a little bit of this because we were all isolated for over a year last year. So we too, all of us need a reentry. I think it will be a lot. It will be very different. I would prefer to be there with you live, but there will be quite a bit of adjustment for me to know what it's like to teach a Sunday school live again. Now, without love, without friendship, it's hard to create a beloved community because you don't know what people need, right? You don't know what people want. This is the most New York thing I saw on Friday. Friday night, I was on a subway, and there was a homeless guy. He was sleeping on the subway. He was laying up. And this woman, nice woman, took out a bag of chips from her bag and went to the homeless guy and said, "Hey, are you hungry? Do you want this chips?" And the homeless guy, he took the bag, he read the ingredients, and he said, "Oh, thank you so much, but I'm allergic." So he gave that bag. That's the most New York thing, right? The homeless guy rejected the food because he had allergies. But without those friendships, without knowing the people, it's very hard. It's very hard to know what justice looks like, what equity looks like for them, and so friendship are the foundation for everything that we're trying to build as Christians and those who have been called to serve the world. Do you see this with your community? Do you see friendship as important, and the decline of friendship as a hindrance to the ministry of your church and your missions in life?
Anyone have any reflections on that? Examples where you've seen a lack of friendship being a hindrance to our ability to do ministry, to do justice, to connect in a meaningful way with our community?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to name a phenomenon, and I'm curious if maybe this might strike a chord with others. I'm thinking about how for so many folks, part of the awakening of the last several years was understanding that, gosh, I actually don't know that much about what's happening in the Black community and their fears around the police because I don't have a lot of friends in the Black community. Mm-hmm. And so I think we all became more aware of the barriers that we have between us and communities that we care about or want to be in relationship with, but then we're like, now what do we do? Do we like run out and find Black friends, and then it becomes almost transactional. And so I think mm-hmm. I feel like I've had conversations with several folks who felt like, I really want to connect. I want to I want to learn. I want to listen. I want to be available, but I don't know how to do that at this point in my life. Mm-hmm. Because there is a level of segregation that exists for so many of us.
Yeah, and you shouldn't feel bad. I was in Ferguson, Missouri, right? I was in Ferguson. I interviewed a widow, white woman who was married to a Black man for 32 years, right? Her husband had just passed away, and they lived and raised their children in Ferguson. And she told me she had no idea of what the Black community was going through, right? And she was married to a Black man, and she raised biracial mm-hmm. daughters mm-hmm. in Ferguson.
Wow!
And she said she had no idea, mm-hmm. right? So it's not her, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do you think your church can do to foster friendship, right? Because like the earlier comment, it's very hard in our society to have places where you can make friends, right? Obviously, coming to church is one of the top ways to make friends. It used to be when the community came to church. Mm-hmm. But do you have any ideas? I have some, but it's more relevant if it comes from those who are there. What are your thoughts?
I've got an idea over here. Thank you.
When I first came to this church, there was a group called Social Service Group, and we sewed and knit hats and things for people, and that was a way to socialize. We would meet every week to do something, to make something, and I understand that we might be getting a makers group going. The social service group isn't there anymore. Doesn't exist anymore, but we're thinking about getting another group together to make different things for people. Mm-hmm. So that might be a way to interact.
Yeah, that's
more.
great.
Thank you. Another idea over here.
Before the pandemic, we had an active racial justice group here, and we met frequently, and we had a whole weekend of workshops, and one of the things that came out of all of that was we have a Cameroonian community as part of our church. And for people who say they have no opportunity to meet Black people, I talked to one of the Cameroonians who said they feel isolated because the white people during coffee hour, the white people gather with the people they know, and the Cameroonians talk to the people they know. And I think we don't have coffee hour inside anymore, maybe today, but we're not going to have coffee. But anyway, I think that we don't see that as a way to get acquainted. And a group of us have a Cameroonian nurse in our group, and she educates us on things that she is doing in the community and how she talks to her sons about safety and all of that. So there are opportunities at Westminster.
Yeah.
I just think we need to take advantage of them.
Yeah, and I think that the key here is that friendship is what happens when you're doing something else, right? So there's a book by a sociologist called The Great Good Place, and it's all about communities and the importance of communities. That's a book where he talks about the third space, right? Every person has, first place is our home, second place is our job, but every person needs a third space. The third place is a place where the only point of going there is conversation, right? The only point you go there is to hang out. And it's neutral ground. Nobody's hosting, nobody's having to do all the work. You just go there to hang out. And the classic example is Cheers, right? The TV show Cheers, that bar, right? Everybody knows, sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name and they're always glad you came. I think churches used to be historically, and he wrote that in the book, historically churches were that third place. If you weren't at your job, if you weren't at home, you were at your church doing something. And even before COVID, right, churches became programmatic, and those who went most often ended up doing all the work. So you were volunteering, you weren't just hanging out, you were running something. And people who went were getting something. They went for transactional purposes, and we lost the essence of just hanging out, just for conversation, right? And so I know we're coming up to time here, so I want to encourage you to create more space just to hang out and to not see that. Now we have the science to back it up, right? That it's not a waste of time to just hang out. It's actually important for your health and for the health of your community to just hang out and talk and do nothing programmatically. Yeah.
We have a few minutes, but we have about 10 minutes before we need to completely drop off for the live stream. And one of the things I want to plug is our small groups ministry at this church. We are working on forming more small groups, a variety of different types of small groups. We already have some that are up and moving and open to new folks, but I'm curious about your kind of sociological take on small groups. What makes an effective small group? How do they get beyond just kind of maybe a functional or perfunctory kind of relationship into something really deep and especially within the context of a Christian church? How does our theology direct us to be in community together in those kinds of settings?
Yeah, I think the key, again, from a sociological perspective, to have that third space, and small groups are the place to do this, right? Because like I said, even in Acts 2, you're talking about 10 to 15 people, right? That's what Acts 2 describe as the church, who they were gathering daily, devoted to the apostles' teaching and to prayer and to breaking of bread. That was 10 to 15 people. That's it. And so small group are the ideal place to do that. Sociologically, again, every society is different. So I'm talking specifically about America, right? To be able to get 10 people together, it's a lot easier than 50. And so to foster those relationships, you need to have regulars. There has to be a core people who come together. It cannot be over programmized, right? So that it can be, we have to talk about these 5 things, and that has to be clear to the people who come, right? So it has to be clear that this is a hangout. You can just come and hang out, and you don't have to have great insight to the Bible. You're not going to be made to go through every questions and read long passages. Although that if the group wants, right, those are the things that need to bubble up on their own. It usually again in this book, the Great Good Place, he recommends a neutral place so that everybody who's there is equally showing up just to hang out. So unfortunately, somebody has to host, and this is where church staff needs to, that's why they say, Sundays are work days, no worship days for clergy, right? For those of us of clergy, it's very hard to just sit and receive and listen to the Spirit when you're leading, when you're in charge of doing things. And it's the same for small groups. So we pass this on to lay people who have to host. They have to make sure the house is clean. They have to make sure, their snacks and drinks and all of these things. And this, it's an added responsibility that today, especially under COVID, people don't need this. I think we also need to start changing the culture of what hosting means. I think I'm from Argentina, right? So in Latin America, it's more common, especially in Argentina, to just show up. If you're passing by somebody's house, you just show up, right? There's no, you just ring the bell. If they're there, they're there. If not, and there are rituals of just hanging out. So if my friend from Argentina rings the bell now, right, it would not be a surprise. I would let him in, and we would drink mate, right, the Argentinian tea, and we would just talk about nothing, right? And that's a ritual that we do, right? I always have some cookies. There's always mate in the house. There's always coffee. And you just sit around and talk, and that's expected, right? It doesn't matter, right? My house, I have 3 kids. The house is never clean, right? It's never organized. It's never, ready for proper company, but nobody cares, right? If I go into their house, it would be the same. Eating on paper plates, that's okay for us, right? And I think sometimes we make too much out of hosting that the act of hosting overshadows the point of hosting, right? Of being together. So those are are my recommendation. Keep it small. Keep it with no strict hardcore agendas, and be okay with the creating the social conditions for people to just hang out, to not have to put up, there's a lot of research now, especially with social media, especially with young people, the importance of putting an image, of showing what people think of you, right? This was not something that our brains and our social conditions, our culture designed us to do. We were never meant to expose who we are and what we think to thousands of people, right? Or even 50 people at once. But now, because of social media, young people are having to do that. They're being formed. They're being raised in a context where it's not just what you say to your friends, right? It's what the entire world will potentially think of you, even though the entire world doesn't care. But they don't know this. They don't know this, right? And I know, not that young, right? I know millennials, right? People in their 20s, early 30s who think that way, that, if I do something wrong, the whole world is going to know about it, right? And that for me, that was never when it was in my 20s and 30s. The thought, right? I mean, you got to be some arrogant, pretentious person to think that what you said, millions of people will come and think of it. But for these young people, it's real for them, and the pressure of that is debilitating. Clearly debilitating, because we know of the medicalization and the anxiety disorder that's also a crisis, which I think it's a byproduct of a lack of those close friendship that they can trust.
I like my friend group, and I like to say that if you come over to our house and the pile of laundry is still on the couch, we really love you. Like, then we're friends. If I haven't folded laundry for you to come over. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? All right.
I think how friendship is defined has changed over the years. Like, now you can friend someone online, friend them. And also, like, those devices like Alexa, they say, turn off the lights or play this music, and you can be really rude. And I think the younger people don't have the social skills because they just yell at the Alexa. And now they don't know how to interact with each other, even introducing themselves to people and social things. I think some of that's missing. So say any other comments you have about how technology is changing friendship.
Yeah, so there's a study that shows that social media has zero effects on the quality of friendship, right? So it's, where was I? I just read it recently, but it can help you find friends, but the people you find on social media, that you friend on social media, never become part of your friend circle unless you make that extra step of just hanging out, just having those conversations with them, right? And I'm sure this is true for a lot of people who've been on social media. I found friends that I haven't seen in many years from high school. But if I was filling out that survey of how many close friends I have, right, those would not be counted as the close friends I have today. Those are, they're if I ran into them on the street, we would have a nice conversation, might go have a cup of coffee. But if I have something, those are not the people that I go to when I have a challenge, when I need somebody to talk to, right? I go to people like David, right? Your pastor, and people who, like, I wouldn't have stayed in their houses in Boston if where I went to high school, if I was there. Where I did stay in David's house when I was there, right? It's different, and so social media doesn't improve the quality of friendship, but because of everything else that social media brings, is more detrimental to friendship, especially to young people who've never had friends. And this is radical to think of this, but there are entire generations of young people who are growing up without knowing the type of friendship that we grew up with, right? People over 40 at least, right? That those who had to make friends before devices existed, who were allowed to play on the streets, right? The Gen Xers, we're latchkey kids. We played on the street. We had to make do. You just went on the park, and you had to figure it out to make friends. You had to figure it out how to play. Kids today have no such thing. I met a guy in California who runs a company. They call themselves research coaches. And schools, a lot of private schools, hire his team to teach kids how to play together during recess, because they notice that all these little kids go out in recess and they're just walking around. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to play with each other, right? This is today. This is happening now, and there are companies rising to meet that need to do organized recess plays, right? Which is unimaginable to people my age and older, right? That what you have free time and you don't know what to do. You just standing around, right? And I think part of the reason for that is the devices, right? That we're just kids today. Just they think texting and whatever TikTok, whatever they use is a relationship, because they've never had intimate, close friendship. And that's, again, as people who are older, as those who know better, as those who are part of a church, a community, who are trying to build a beloved community, that is our responsibility to show them I think a better way. It sounds judgmental, but it is a better and more significant form of community.
Thank you for that. Reverend Lin will be back with us on November 21st, talking about sacrifice in the beloved community. So we're looking forward to that. Also, next week, we have Dr. Melissa Borja. She is going to be speaking about Afghan resettlement and the involvement of churches. She did her research actually here in Minnesota, though she is from Michigan, on Hmong refugee resettlement. A decade or so ago, and she came and lived here and specifically looked at how churches were helping with refugee resettlement, what worked, what didn't work. And so that conversation, I think, will be really helpful for us as we're thinking about loving our neighbors, our new neighbors that are arriving from Afghanistan. So I'm looking forward to that. I hope you'll join us for that next week. Thank you, Reverend Lin, for your time with us. It's been a really great time to reflect on friendships, and I appreciate your thoughts, your expertise, and your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for your comments. That was, very thoughtful of you. Thank you.
All right. And for those